this is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Well, to start off with, I want to say thank you to all those that are serving and have served in our military. And I do want to apologize that our government has put you in harm's way needlessly. I'm your host, Nathan Davis, and welcome to Daily Dose of Reality. To start off with, we are getting ready to start having power grid drills. And they're going to start from November 13th through the 14th. They're calling this Grid X2. Grid X1 came out and happened in 2011, and this is an extension of that. They're going to be testing out basically the preparedness of our grid for in case of an EMP or any other type of strike against us that could disrupt our grid, which really hasn't been greatly improved since the 40s. To me, there's been so many warnings that have come about that, we need to improve our grid system. And really, we have a failing infrastructure all around, but our electrical system is the most vulnerable. Industries have not produced any kind of viable defense for EMPs, whether they are naturally caused by the, solar flares, or caused by, a foreign country detonating a nuclear device in the upper atmosphere. China came out about 6 months ago with a device that they came up with against us. They could use it against us. That is a low altitude EMP device. Basically, it would be dropped from a plane, and at a certain altitude would be detonated, and it would hit a smaller area. But if they hit a main power plant, if they hit a main part of the grid, they could blow out a whole area. They can knock out our defenses. I mean, there's nothing that's been beefed up. And I think it's funny that, there was a movie that came out in 1983. It was a James Bond movie, View to a Kill. And the main premise of that movie was making microchips, making processors, computer processors, that were impervious to EMP. So even back then, 30 years ago, they were talking about, we need to beef up our technology. And here we are today with the same types of processors and things of that nature that they are not secure to EMPs. Your computers, your cell phones, your cars, everything that has a computer chip would not function. Anything that uses electricity would not function because the grid would be blown out. So they're doing this preparedness drill. And this is kind of scary to a point because it's like, what are they preparing for? Do they know something that they're not letting on to the American people? And so this is going to be happening from the 13th to the 14th. And it's just testing our preparedness. This article I found on Infowars.com. Kurt Nemo wrote that. And in conjunction to that, and this is from National Liberty Federation news, in Hawaii, and I think I brought this up last week, Chinese troops are going to be deployed. They're going to be deployed in the effort of, this drill. To test preparedness and to, have foreign aid come in. So the article basically says, Aloha Hawaiians, if you see what you think are soldiers from the Communist People's Republic of China's army, wandering about in your neck of the woods, Tuesday through Thursday next week, your imagination is not playing tricks on you. So, they're letting people know about this, and they're going to be there from the 12th to the 14th. And it says that they're basically, this is the first time that this has ever occurred. and they're going to be simulating humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. Now, what worries me about this is a lot of these attacks that happen, like LAX, 9/11, all of these different things, there's drills going on at the same time. So we need to be on high alert between the 11th and the 14th, today through Thursday, because there could be something that, could happen. They're preparing for a scenario of an EMP. And this, what I think this does is, there's so many people that are not in on the schemes that they set up. I think what this does is it confuses the system enough that they can implement it and nobody's the wiser. The people that are supposed to come to our aid aren't there because they think that what's occurring is part of the drill. It just causes mass confusion within these systems that are set up to help in these type of disaster reliefs. So if you've got them occupied doing something else, then you can do something over here and nobody would be the wiser. So that's the scary part of this. That is something that we have to be on alert about. So we have China coming in, and they're going to be in Hawaii. On top of that, this weekend, something called Urban Shield in northern Texas was undergoing drills as well. And they said it's going to look like martial law has been declared in parts of north central Texas this weekend. The region's first Urban Shield training exercise is being conducted at an assortment of 20 different sites and points in between. And this comes from the Free Patriot website, freepatriot.org. Heavily armed vehicles, heavily armed police, SWAT team, paramedic, and bomb squads will abound as the DHS, that's the Department of Homeland Security, funded exercise, marketed and advertised as a counter-terrorist drill is held. It's an exercise in preparedness, they say. And that's something that is kind of worrisome. They're saying that we're simulating martial law. Don't worry, it's not real, but we're simulating martial law. What in the world? I mean, people should not condone this type of activity. We should never be practicing for martial law within private sectors. If they want to practice this on military bases, I mean, they have military installations that have setups that look like towns where they practice these type of scenarios. They have one where they have a setup that looks like an Iraqi village that was used. This was set up, Hollywood style. They actually had people from Hollywood come in and help them out, set up the different pyrotechnics and stuff like that. And this was used to prepare soldiers for going over there and dealing with urban combat in Iraq. That could be redone to simulate, U.S. cities and towns and stuff of that nature. But the thing of it is that when you declare martial law, you're basically restricting power to a military law. I mean, you're basically saying that, anyone and everyone's a suspect. And this is the danger of this, is they're preparing for something. And, they're making it like it's no big deal. This is a very big deal. And this is happening all over the country, just not in northern Texas. We had it here. And this came out on the local news. My mouth dropped open. Because they were talking about they were having war simulations, naval war simulations out in the Chesapeake Bay. They were having gunner boats running up and down the Chesapeake Bay simulating an attack scenario. Usually they do this far out to sea, and they're doing it right in the Chesapeake Bay. And, they said that they're going to be shooting each other with blanks, and people going along the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, which is our bridge system, shouldn't be alarmed. It's not real. But this is kind of conditioning people so that when they see these scenarios, they're going to, oh, that's just a drill, instead of thinking, maybe that's possibly real. And that's another thing. It's a conditioning scenario. You condition people to see these things, and then they believe they're all drills. And then when the real thing happens, people aren't prepared for it. They're not ready. It's kind of like the boy that cried wolf. You cry wolf enough, and people don't come running. So people aren't going to believe when the real thing happens. Another thing, and this I brought up last week, was the cavity search. The man that went through the 14-hour cavity search and then was billed for it in New Mexico. Now, this isn't the first incident. This came out in Yahoo News, where there was an incident back in October. This incident that happened, that I talked about last week, happened in January of this year. The incident that they found that happened before that happened in October of 2012. The guy was stopped for not using a failure to use his turn signal by the same police department. And this one's even more. I wouldn't say more because, the other guy went through 14 hours. This guy only went through 6. But he was made to basically strip to his waist in public, in the public parking lot that they pulled him over in. And they administered a partial search there. Then they submitted him for a X-ray and anal penetration to check for drugs at a nearby hospital. And get this, it's the same hospital that administered the same test to the guy in January. So you've got this hospital that's willing to do this test, and again, this is a breach of warrant because you have it happening in one county, and then in another county, that's where they're doing the search, and the warrant is not valid in that county. So again, this is the thing, is that in both cases, that's something that was not neglected in the previous cases, that they had a drug sniffing dog that detected the odor of drugs on the seat. So they have these drug detecting dogs, and either they're trained to give a false notification of drugs so that they can start a search and use that as probable cause to basically violate these people's rights. And they made him drop his pants and underwear in a public parking lot to search him. This happened at 2 a.m., but still. And then they took him to the Gila, whatever you want to call it, medical center. And again, this guy was billed $600. The one in January was billed $6,000 because that was a 14-hour exam. But this is the ludicrous thing, is I think that the police department and this medical center are running a racket. The medical center bills the person that was violated and gets money for these heinous acts, and the police department gets to report that they did add this to their quota. Even though they didn't find drugs, they performed a search. So it means that they're using their resources to look for drugs. Even if they don't find it, they're using the resources to look for drugs. So I think it's a racket between this medical center and the police department in that county for the police department get funding for drug searches, and for this medical center to, bill people for being violated. This is just sick, and it shows the overstepping of bounds that the police are doing, because this is not the only place where these type of violations happen. I mean, there's been other, incidences where people have been humiliated, searched in public, had officers reach down their pants looking for drugs, and that's the sad thing, is that this type of stuff is going on all over the place, not just in New Mexico. They listed, let's see, get back to that article, because they actually listed other violations. Texas, Wisconsin, and Kansas in recent months have had similar incidences. It's ridiculous. And we're becoming a society that accepts it. That accepts that we have to go through that for our own protection from, drugs that are really not hurting anybody except the people that use them. And in the case of marijuana, they don't have enough case studies to really show if it's harmful or beneficial. There's some case studies that show it's beneficial, that it has positive effects with cancer and other ailments, that it helps people in pain, it helps people on chemotherapy improve their appetite, and yet we're demonizing it as a society. I mean, hemp was also banned under that because the paper industry, the paper mills that used wood pulp were threatened. The wood industry was threatened because the hemp paper was a superior paper. It had no acid in it, so it didn't decay. It didn't disintegrate. I mean, some of our historical documents are written on hemp paper, and they don't yellow that much. With wood paper, it yellows, and that's why you have so many chemicals added to paper to make it white. Wood pulp paper is not white. It's kind of an off-white. It's a beige. But to make it high bright, they actually add a lot of chemicals into the paper and other things to lighten it. I mean, really? I already went over that. And speaking of overstepping their bounds, a South Carolina police chief threatens to target anyone who advocates legalization of marijuana. And this comes about from a Facebook post. The officers posted on Facebook that they seized approximately $40,000 worth of marijuana from a guy's home. And so people posted, different things, just kind of jabbing at him, like, why don't you go after criminals and stuff like that. One posted, you should arrest the people shooting people in 5 Points. I guess that's the area. Instead of worrying about the stoners that's not bothering anyone. It'll be legal here one day anyway. So the police chief wrote the guy back, and I'm not going to use his name. We have arrested all of the violent offenders in 5 Points. Thank you for sharing your views and giving us reasonable suspicion to believe you might be a criminal. A criminal, because you wrote your disagreement for their actions. We will work on finding you. Now, this post was deleted by somebody in the office, but, of course, in the next post, there was an admission by the chief that he wrote that post. This is Internment Chief Santiago posting. I was just notified that one of my staff members deleted my post. So they are admitting that the previous post was his, or he is admitting this. I put everyone on notice that if you advocate for the use of illegal substances in the city of Columbia, then it's reasonable to believe you might also be involved in the particular activity. So basically he's saying that if you write out against this, you might be involved in it, even though it might just be that you see the wrongdoing in having a law against something that doesn't hurt anyone. And why would somebody feel threatened if you are not doing anything wrong? Here comes that line again. If you're not doing anything wrong, why, do you care? That's the thing, is that law enforcement uses all the time. For searches and stuff of that nature, if they're going to search you, they say, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, then you shouldn't be against being searched. That's not the point. It's unconstitutional. It steps on the Fourth Amendment. These people need to pull out their oath of office and read it. It says to honor and defend the Constitution, not step all over it. Where was I? Apply this same concept to gang activity or gang members. You can have gang tattoos and advocate that lifestyle, but that only makes me suspicious of you. Of them, excuse me. I can't do anything until they commit a crime. So feel free to express yourself, and I will continue to express myself and what we stand for. I am also open to hearing how our citizens feel like we can be effective in fighting all crime. Now, here's the thing, is that he's basically putting this person that wrote this comment in line with gang members who commit violent crimes. He's advocating, not going after people that are committing non-violent crimes, and he's then flipping it around and talking about gang members with gang tattoos, or people that have gang tattoos are, associated by having these tattoos. And so by having this mentality that marijuana should be legal, you are guilty by association. So, this is just warped logic to me. You don't sit there and switch somebody into a criminal because they don't condone the laws you enforce. That's just an opinion, and it's a constitutional opinion. Some of these people, really, they take an oath, they don't really care about that oath. The only thing they care about is the uniform and the badge and the power that they think that it gives them over others. They don't realize that they are a citizen and that they are there to serve and protect other citizens. They do not get any type of extra law or extra power for that. The only thing they get is to basically enforce the laws. But citizens have the right to do that too. It's called citizen arrest. So citizens can enforce that as well. That's basically common law. If a citizen sees a crime being committed, they have the right to perform a citizen's arrest or detain that person, for committing that crime. So that means the police have no special power other than they have a badge and a gun, and are basically giving the ability to serve and protect through their oath of office or oath of position. So it just doesn't make sense to me. These police officers, and I've known quite a few of them. Many of them are very nice. Many of them do understand their oath of office, but there are others that don't. That they think it gives them some special power, that they feel empowered when they put that, uniform on. They feel like, they've been given some sort of extra power over others, that they love to assert their authority. There was one on the internet where it's a peaceful protest, it was a bunch of hippie type people, and one was blowing bubbles. And the officer looked at the lady and said, "If you blow any more bubbles in this direction, I'm going to use that, and that's going to be assault against an officer. Because you could get that in, our eyes, and that's an assault, and I'll arrest you. So you better cut that out. Don't you blow any more bubbles." Seriously? And this officer was serious about that, and the lady was like in shock. And just check that out. Bubble blowing is now an arrestable, offense. It's like so many other things that they come up with, and they will trump up the law. They will make up stuff to make it seem like what they're doing is right. That's the scary thing. And if an officer is wrong, other officers that come on the scene will usually back them up, even if they're wrong. Just sad. And then on to this. This came out in InfoWars that 3 programmers build working Obamacare site in days, more than the government can do. And the Obamacare site's still down. It's still, not working, or it's not down, but it's still got bugs and not working right. But these 3 programmers came up with their own website. They came up with one that's called healthserpa.com, and it works better than the healthcare.gov site, and gives them information, does a ton more than the official site does. So, I mean, here's 3 programmers, and they come up with a better site in days than the White House could. And this is the thing, is that the administration had 3 years, and they're sitting there acting like, well, we had to rush. Well, if you hired the right people, they could have done it correctly. And they talk about, well, it's associated with a program. It's not a website. It's a program. Well, anything with lines of code is actually a program. So, it's just ludicrous, the excuses they come up for the shoddy job that they did with this website. And here is another thing that I wish, I pray, I hope happens, that they're trying to impeach Attorney General Holder, Eric Holder. And this came out, again, in Infowars.com. Alex Newman was the writer on this one. They're basically trying to get him for Fast and Furious, which he was in on, and other issues. He lied under oath. He's done so many different things. I mean, the man is just very, very corrupt. And he's been bullying states and things of that nature on Second Amendment rights, all kinds of different things. I mean, the man's just taken his power of office to the nth degree and beyond, to a criminal area, many people think, and including myself. There is a representative, Ted Yoho. He's a Republican from Florida, and he wants to impeach him, for many different things, including Fast and Furious, and he unveiled this at a town hall meeting, that he was going to, during the next session, they were definitely going to bring this up and draw up a plan, draw up legislation to get him out of office. And I hope it works. And there are people working on impeaching Obama. And I would be for that too, because he's been in on all of these criminal acts. And a Holder would be the second ever cabinet member to be impeached. The first was William W. Belknap, who was Secretary of War under Grant. And he was impeached in 1876, even though the impeachment happened after his resignation. It happened on the same day. And he resigned, and they still held the proceedings and impeached him. But, of course, once he resigned, they couldn't go forward with the hearing, the Senate hearing. But we really need to get these people out. I mean, they even talk about having to go through, Speaker Boehner, and that's going to be a difficult task because he's really not a strong figure. He's not somebody that's willing to stand up against this administration. He stands up against them minorly. But as he did with the shutdown, he folds. He sides with Obama on a number of different things, and he doesn't have a strong enough backbone to really get the job done. So they want to get him out too. I think that he's, not strong enough to really pull this off, and that he's a hindrance to, really getting back to a constitutional government. I agree. Crybaby Boehner, take him out too. And ahead of us, Egyptian lawyers charge Obama with crimes against humanity. And this came out on November 8th on InfoWars. As an accessory to the Muslim Brotherhood violence. Because he kind of was there in a lot of this. He did not he kind of aided, he kind of egged it on. And so they want to indict him on crimes against humanity, like so many others. I mean, Germany is working on their own thing about spying, and the NSA, and then you got Egypt doing this. I mean, there's so many people that are going against our country because our country is criminal. Our government is criminal. Not our country, but our government is criminal. And in kind, they look at all Americans as having the same viewpoint as our government. Well, unfortunately, there are a lot of people that really just are so blind they don't see what's really going on with our government. Let's see. But yeah, that's all that was in that article. And this one disturbed me. When did Obama start writing for the Huffington Post? This is actually an op-ed from Obama to the Huffington Post about Congress needs to pass the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. And he cites that, people, and this is for gay, bisexual, and transgender individuals. And he says that people don't have to worry about the color of their skin, or their religious affiliation, or being women, or having a disability. But the same doesn't go for lesbians, gays, bisexuals, and transgender. I, on the other hand, think differently. I don't even think that there should be laws to protect people for their skin color, their religious beliefs, their sexual. Their gender, their sexual orientation, or if they have a disability. I think that should be up to the employer. And if they discriminate, they're going to have to answer to the public at large. A business goes by revenue. It goes by revenue. So if something affects their revenue or the money they're getting in from their consumer base, whatever that is, they change or they die. Either or happens. So for me, I think it's you don't need legislation in this to protect people. My job, doesn't discriminate at all. I mean, we have people of all, different types, and they make accommodations for them, and not because there's any type of law, but because it's the right thing to do. And we have gays, lesbians, transgender. We have all different types of people working there, and they're not, in threat of losing their job. There's job security there because, they're not discriminating against them. And there's so many employers out there that are doing that. And those that don't, well, that's their choice. And I think that also this gives too much power to the employee, because if they get fired for some other reason, they can come at them with this law and say, hey, I was fired because I'm gay, or I was fired because I'm a woman. It's happened in the past. People have used these laws to say they were fired because they were a woman, or they were black, or they were of their religious affiliation or whatever. And so the business has to go through all these legal proceedings in order to prove that they fired them legitimately. And in many cases, it's a legitimate firing. Yes, there are cases where discrimination happens, but they're not as many. This causes a lot of problems because now the employer has to worry about, okay, if I fire this person, are they going to come back at me, and how much am I going to have to pay out in legal proceedings? Is it going to add to my overhead? Blah, 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 blah. And that's going to cause a lot of problems. The other thing is if they don't hire them because they don't qualify, they could use this against the employer as well. That's the problem. That's what people don't see, is that when you start to have this type of market manipulation, it causes more problems. It does not take care of certain problems. It creates more problems. And now you have employers that are afraid to fire people because of these anti-discrimination laws, or they're afraid not to accept somebody's employment because they're afraid somebody's going to, go out and say, well, they didn't hire me because, whatever, and I was discriminated against. It causes too many problems. It does not help. And so here's our president writing on Huffington Post about how they need to pass this. And it's like, dude, you don't get it. You really don't get it. That and he even cites Martin Luther King, for God's sake. That's not the point. Martin Luther King was not about force. He was not somebody that sat there and said you have to force employers to hire people. That angers me. The man uses Martin Luther King, even though he wants to do everything by force, Obama, and Martin Luther King was talking about doing things passively, and that's a libertarian mindset. That's a constitutionalist mindset that don't do things by force. And you have this where they're sitting there saying, well, we have to protect people because of their sexuality. No! Damn it, they shouldn't be protected because of the color of their skin or their gender or anything else. It has to do with, if you're going to do that, you're going to cause more problems. There's no protection for the employer here. There's only protection for the employee. And it creates a tumultuous environment where you have employers that are not going to be willing to hire anybody new because of the fact that if they do, put applications out there or accept applications, then they feel like I have to hire these people because I'm going to, be labeled as discriminating them or have them use that law against me. And it's not the fact that there's no grounding on it, it's the fact that they have to go through the legal proceedings to prove that they didn't break that law. You can't, it's very hard to do. It is very hard to do. There's been so many people have come forward and said, well, I was discriminated against because of blah, blah, blah. And then later on it comes out that they were fired for legitimate reasons, that they weren't doing their job like they were supposed to. And that's what, and this is what I want to talk about in the last half of my show is the political correctness in this country is a danger. It's not a benefit, okay? Creating laws to protect people, it sounds good on paper. It really does. I understand the point of it. But it angers me because they're so blind to the fact of what this will do. The damage it causes. Telling people that you can't put a sign up saying you don't accept these people in your business. I'd rather know. I'd rather know that an establishment does not accept black people. I'd rather know that an establishment does not accept interracial people. I'm in an interracial marriage. My wife is black. We have a daughter and a child on the way. I don't want to go into an establishment that has that perception and is not allowed to put a sign on the door. The thing of it is that taking those signs down does not change the perception of the individual owning the business. They still hold those warped mentalities. Let their business die when they put that sign up. When they put that sign up, their business will die because people won't enter them. They'll be protested against on public streets. They will have a public nightmare because of their prejudice. So let that happen naturally. There doesn't need to be a law. Look at what happened during the Civil Rights Act. It was civil disobedience. It was peaceful civil disobedience that ended these laws. It was not government that did it. It was people like Martin Luther King. It was people that stood up and said, we're not taking this anymore. And marched and protested, took them to court. That's what changed things. That's what changed public perception. The show of abuse of these peaceful protesters as they were shot with fire hoses. The public was outraged at how they were being treated, whether they were racist or not. They were outraged at the fact that, these people were being abused. That's how you end, these type of prejudiced events. You do not do it through law creation. When you do that, that's when you create an environment where you push down those prejudiced thoughts. You put them underground. And those are more dangerous because when they're suppressed, it's like taking a fire and you build it up really, really hot, and then you put a whole bunch of stuff on top of it. The fire's still there. The core of it's still blazing hot, and it gets hotter and hotter and hotter, and then it blows out. It's kind of like Mount St. Helens. Mount St. Helens was capped. It was a capped volcano that had a lot of rock and debris that capped it. And then there was a bunch of pressure that pushed up, and then it exploded. Okay? And that's what's happening, is there's a lot of white supremacy groups that are getting members, okay? Not because our president's black, but because they can use what's being created in policy as a means to get people into their groups. The KKK, if you go to their website now, they're not, showing themselves as a prejudiced group. They're showing themselves as a political group that's supporting the integrity of the white race. So under this, peaceful new look, people get roped in. Oh, this isn't the old KKK, this is the new KKK. It's kind of what happened in the 70s. They had the same thing. Their membership went up because they had a guy in there talking about, peace and prosperity for the white race. And not harming black people, not harming all these other groups, but just, protecting the white race. And everybody signed up and clapped, and, then their violence showed back up again. It gives these groups power. It adds fuel to the fire. And needlessly so. Again, that's one thing I don't understand about people, is the fact that they say, well, we need to protect them. No, you don't. You don't need to protect people like that. Not through laws. Through public outrage. Okay? Through community involvement. You get involved in the community, you sit there and you say, I don't like this business because they're prejudiced. Well, you get enough people on your bandwagon, you get enough evidence against them, and you show the people that evidence, they're going to be just as outraged as you are if that evidence is true. And they're not going to give that business patronage. That's how you end prejudice. That's how you end a prejudice business. Individuals, you can't help if they have prejudiced views. There are certain people that will change their mind over time because something happens, and that perception, that prejudice perception, is washed away by a good deed from somebody of another race, or, whatever. And they're showed the folly of their mentality. But you don't do that through law creation. It just enforces it. It just enforces that prejudice mindset. See, I was right. Look at what they're trying to do. They're trying to, to smother us. They're trying to get rid of us. It creates an environment of anger. It creates an environment, that will breed prejudice views, not squell them. The way you squell prejudiced views is you step back. The government needs to step back. The government needs to do away with all these anti-prejudice laws because they do not do what they're supposed to do. They drive those prejudice behaviors underground. They're still there. There's still business owners that have prejudiced views. I've been in businesses with my wife, and I've gotten looks. We've gotten poor service. There was a pizza place we went to. We were the last serve. We were the first in. We didn't get our pizza, until everybody else got theirs. And it was obvious that there was, something about us that they didn't like. But they didn't have a sign on the door that said whites only or whatever. There's places that, you don't go into because it's a black, only place. Whites know that if I go in there, I might put myself in danger. And that's not being racist, it's just true. I mean, I've been into some places that, just because I'm just like, whatever. But you kind of get looks like, white boy, you're not supposed to be in here. So it goes both ways, and that's not reverse racism. I can't stand that terminology. Whites are not the only racist. Blacks are racist, Asians are racist, Hispanics are racist. There's every group that's racist. Until we realize that we're all human, and racism, will go away. But that's not going to happen when you keep creating laws that do not do away with the prejudiced views, but just wipe away the visible form of it. And that's dangerous. I mean, even some people that were in the civil rights movement say that, right now is a more volatile condition because prejudice is underground. Those prejudiced views are hidden, so it's not overtly obvious, And that's the danger. And when you create laws like this, and you impede freedom of speech, you impede property rights, and you do all these different things, that adds fuel to the fire. That gives them, a point where they can say, see, I was right. I was right. And when you have that, that's breeding more violence. And with people like myself and my wife and others, that are in the middle of this, we see it more so than one side or the other. I've talked to black people and said, you can sit there and look at me as a white person and say, I've never seen racism. I've seen it twice as much because I see it from the white people and I see it from the black people. I see it from both sides because we get attacked from both sides. And not just both sides, we get attacked from Asians and Hispanics and others that disagree with, race mixing. And some of them go, wow, you're right. But there's others say, well, you've never been, walk past a car and had them lock the doors. Well, I put it this way. And I remember Columbine. And any white person that wore all black and wore a trench coat, trust me, people locked their doors. People wouldn't, they gave them a wide berth because they thought they were crazy white people that were going to go off at any minute. It alienated these kids that were already alienated. I mean, there were a lot of these kids that were just alienated from society. They felt that they didn't fit in. And then you add on top of this that two whack jobs went out and started killing all these people and then killed themselves, and then they all get labeled that way. They all get looked at that way. And they all weren't. So we have to be careful with laws like this, and I think our president, I'll give it to him that he may be well-intentioned in this, though, if you want to look at it another way, he's doing this to drum up racial tensions in this country. There's people that believe that, the creation of these laws and things of that nature are trying to drum up racial tension and also tension between the gay community and the homophobics, in the country and create more violence out of it to show that these laws need to be created. I mean, when you create laws and then all of a sudden violence goes up, you say, oh, we need to create more laws. When it's like, no, it's the law that you created that caused the violence. Duh. But they don't see it that way, and that's not how they're going to portray it in the news. If violence comes about because of anti-discrimination laws like this one, if you start seeing gay people being murdered and stuff like that, it's because of this law. It's because people who are not mentally stable and who are violent are going to look at that and say, you know what, I'm going to take matters into my own hands and do something about this. And that's a dangerous thing. That's really dangerous. And so when you create laws, you empower them. You empower them to go out there and do violent acts because they're enraged. That's the danger here. That's a big danger. And I don't think, if you want to look at it one way or the other, that the president's all well-intentioned and, you know, it's going to end badly anyway, or if you want to look at it as he's setting things up for a violent activity to basically have more authoritative law creation, I mean, that's a possibility right there. You know, people look at a lot of the anti-discrimination laws as being created to drum up violence so that they can create more authoritative laws on top of that to, you know, push things underground, even though they still occur. You know, we still have violence generated by race relation, but the majority of the violence is blacks against whites. That has a higher percentage than whites against blacks. And the biggest percentage in the black community is black-on-black violence. And nobody's addressing that. The main causes, the main causes of black-on-black violence are inner city gangs, like in Chicago and Detroit and others, you know, that are fighting over territory for drugs and prostitution. If you take that power out of their hands, you take the drugs out of their hand, they have no more money coming in. They don't have drug money coming in. You take away their business. This is the same thing that happened with mobsters. The mafioso. And during the prohibition of alcohol. The mafia came in and ran things. They set up within a year all these different routes to bring alcohol into the country, distribution, you know, speakeasies. They set all that up. They were running everything behind the scenes. And that's the thing, is that they took over something that was illegal. And they made it theirs. Now, of course, you know, they took over gambling in Las Vegas, but the reason they took over gambling in Las Vegas was they had the financing from Prohibition. They took the money they made off Prohibition, once Prohibition went south, and went into legitimate business. A lot of drug dealers do that. They take the money they make from drug dealing and go into legitimate business once they get tired of the game. But it's the fact that there's violence and there's detriment to society that's created in the process of these illegal activities that's a problem. They're leeching off society and they're creating violence. And we're doing nothing about it. And the majority of inner city areas that have issues are black communities. And it's nothing against blacks. I think they were given a raw deal if they live in those areas. You know, the laws that were created, I think, are creating a bad area to live for, you know, black America that live in these conditions, that live in inner city areas. It creates an environment that is hostile. And many people can't escape it, so they become involved in it because of necessity, because they need to feed their family, because they don't want that violence to come to their door, so they participate in it to push it away from their door. And that's the sad thing. if we did away with a lot of these drug laws and the prostitution laws, and we made lawful attempts to at the state and local level, I don't think that the federal government should to regulate these activities. The funding that comes about from it could go to rebuild those areas, to reestablish them as viable communities, and improve the living conditions of individuals there. Bring in commerce to them. Businesses don't want to operate in these places because they're violent. They know that their overhead's going to go up because of higher insurance rates, higher security fees, robbery. I mean, they're going to have to make allotments for things being stolen. So, businesses don't like to work within those communities because of the fact that it's going to cost them more to run with very little gain. So overall, the government has hindered the black community. They've hindered the Hispanic community. They've hindered the gay community and the lesbian community because they've basically put the focal point on them. If there wasn't laws created against these communities, then the focus wouldn't be on them. Prejudiced individuals wouldn't have anything to be angry about because their tax dollars wouldn't be used to, fund certain things they disagree with. And in the case with the gay community, I mean, like the Marriage Act, that was against it. For a lot of reasons, because I don't think the government should be dictating what marriage is. That's not their purpose. That's the purpose of a church. The church should be doing that. And if a church doesn't find that, a same-sex marriage is legitimate marriage, then they don't host them. And I think we need to reassure these churches that, and I don't think that's going to happen under the Obama administration, that doing away with the Marriage Act does not mean that they have to host these weddings. And businesses shouldn't be, discriminate or should not be closed because they discriminate against same-sex couples or blacks or anybody else. Again, it has to do with the community at large. If the community does not condone that kind of activity and viewpoints, they're going to be pushed out of business anyway. Why do you need a law if you can do it without government intrusion? By basically not buying from them. Businesses go belly up because people don't buy from them. The other problem is that if you have illegal areas where people can bring in commerce, that adds fuel to the fire because you're funding businesses that could go out. Well, I'm going to do illegal stuff to keep my doors open. You have to do away with that as well. That's the thing, is that government intrusion has caused this problem, has caused all these issues. The one thing that they should be involved in, they're not, which is currency creation. He gave that to the bankers. I mean, everything that the government does is just mind-boggling. Unless you look at it as that it's all orchestrated for special interest, corporate interests, not constituent interest. There's so few in there that are doing stuff for the constituents. And I will say this, those that are doing it for the constituents are the ones that get attacked all the time from both sides. Like Ted Cruz, may not agree with everything he's for, but, at least he's up there fighting for constitutional rights. Ron Paul, even though he's retired, I mean, he was in there and he was getting beat up, especially when he got notoriety for running in 2008. So anybody that's up there that's actually doing something that's beneficial, they get attacked mercilessly from the media. And sometimes from both sides. Because they don't have anything to gain from the system disintegrating as it stands. And it's 10 o'clock now, so I'm going to get ready to end it. But, and it just... I wish people wake up to the fact that the government does not solve problems, it creates problems. It does not aid in relations amongst races and stuff of that nature. It hinders them. It creates anger and frustration. And, people feel like their rights are being stepped on. So they become angry and frustrated. And those that are violent in their own nature take it out on those that they think orchestrated that law creation. So I say if this law is passed, that the president wants passed, that he wrote a op-ed in the Huffington Post about, I'd say it's the law that would cause that kind of violence. It's going to cause major problems. If a business chooses not to hire somebody for whatever reason, that's on them. And there's so many different outlets for somebody to come out and say, look, I was fired for the wrong reasons. Giving them a law to empower them is not going to be a good thing, because it will hurt businesses that legitimately fire people for the right reasons. Because you're going to have people with bad intentions that are going to go after a business because they hold a grudge, not because there's a legitimate reason for going after them in the first place. And so this business is dragged through the process needlessly because of these anti-discrimination laws. People don't understand that. They say, oh, they're helping people. They're keeping people employed. No, they're not. No, they're not. Yeah, because there's been so many people have used these anti-discrimination laws, dragged businesses through the ringer just to come out and show that there was no legitimate reason, or there was a legitimate reason for them being fired that was not related to their gender or their race or their religion. And now we're going to add on top of that their sexuality. It's not going to be good. Businesses are already not hiring. And now you're going to add something else on top of that they have to worry about. If I don't hire this person because they're, homosexual or bisexual or transgender, then they could, come after me and say, well, I wasn't hired because of, my sexuality and not because I didn't qualify for the job. And that's going to be what's going to happen. Because it's happened in the past. That's what people don't want to realize, is that these things have happened before with the current anti-discrimination laws that should not be on the books. And I'll leave you with that. I'll leave you with the thought that if we do things on our own without government intrusion, things would be so much better. Things would go so much smoother, and there would be less anger, violence, and, overall emotional outbursts towards one another. It'll happen with some, but you can kind of contain it on its own. This is just adding fuel to the fire. So that's just something to think about. Coming from somebody that's seen it firsthand, that's witnessed it with his own family. Don't think that the government is there for your protection. Don't look at it that way, because we all know that most of those in Congress and most of those in the administration, everything, are going for special interests and not yours. And with that, I want to say, again, thank you for those that are serving and that have served. And again, I want to apologize that our government has put you in harm's way needlessly so many times in the past and currently. Have a good night.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.